Hi.
Hi, Comrade Guillermo.
How are you doing?
Good to see you. We're happy to see you.
Likewise. Ricardo, Steve, comrades, how are you?
We're great. How are you?
Good, good. A very busy day. I'll tell you a few new things. It's finishing right now, a national plenary of the Coordinadora Sindical Clasista, which is the grouping of the trade union fractions led by the PO, or promoted by the PO. And over 2,000 people participated, and we were calculating about belonging to some 93 different unions on a nationwide scale. So that's a pretty big deal. And that's, so we were working all day with the, how do you say this? The, you know, the online, the different speeches, the online transmission. And it's finishing now. It's the final speeches right now. And it's been very important, there's something going on, and we'll talk about it right now, but there's starting to be, you know, more of a reaction from the employed working class, apart from the unemployed workers who have been on the vanguard these months. So it's an interesting situation.
That's excellent to hear.
Yeah. For example, one of the speeches was given from the pickets on the highways in the southern province of Neuquén in Patagonia, where there's been a health worker strike of about, I think it's almost 40 days, which is a wildcat strike against the labor contract that the union signed, and they have 8 roadblocks across the province. And the local DA has just put out you know, not a statement, a resolution saying that the governor has to negotiate with the strikers. So it's an interesting situation. That's just one example, but you know, it was, the whole meeting has been very representative of the local struggles and pretty massive. So really happy about that. Maybe I can send you, Ali, I could send you a picture if you want. Maybe you can share it. It has the Zoom with all the participants today in the meeting. I can look for that if you're interested.
Sure. Send it to, Beth is chairing this meeting today.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have her on WhatsApp, but you can send me her email and I'll mail it to her.
I can also have you share your screen if you have it on your computer. Is that okay?
I'll look for it and try to do that, yeah.
Okay, then yeah, let me just let you share your screen. Okay, you should be allowed to now. So.
Also, the only reason I can't turn on my camera is it's broken, like it's not working. So my apologies about that. I'm not trying to hide.
So let's see. 1 sec. Yeah, I'm not that savvy either. Let's see. To share screen.
So on the bottom, there'll be a big arrow that's in green. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty easy.
Yeah. Cool. Is it? And be sure to click share your audio also when you do that, so that way we can hear what the video is, if it's a video.
No, it's not a video.
It's not. Okay, cool.
What you're seeing is just it's just the 1,000 people in the Zoom, but it's more people because in many places there were meetings where people used a single Zoom account, both in neighborhood assemblies of the Polo Obrero and some conflicts, like I was telling you, in the roadblocks, in an occupied clinic, which is fighting against a shutdown and layoffs, and has been occupied by its workers, and we're leading that struggle. So in several places, it's not just a single, it's not a single person in a Zoom account, but small meetings of comrades. And there are also people following online on Facebook, because the Zoom was full of the 1,000 accounts. It lets us join in. So this is these are the participants in today's Coordinadora Sindical Clasista meeting.
Wow.
Wow, that's impressive. That's so cool.
Hopefully one day we'll be able to do this big of events one day here too. Not anytime soon, but
Yeah.
You never know.
So are we
I'm
waiting
trying-
for more comrades? Because I was just chatting, not really going into an actual exposition. You guys tell me.
Yes, I think we were. I mean, I thought there would be a few more people here from the Freedom Socialist Party.
What about
But-
Steve? Is Steve there?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm here.
Steve is on, right? Okay.
Yeah, Steve's on.
Just gonna go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Okay, yeah. I figured there'd be at least a couple more people, but I'm not sure how much longer we should wait for them because your time's important, you know? Can we maybe do 2 more minutes until 12:10?
Yeah,
Or sorry,
whatever you
12:10
say.
here. Awesome. What time is it over there?
It's 4 p.m. 8 minutes
Okay.
past 4 p.m.
Okay, okay. But
Um,
it's Sunday, right? Or is it?
Saturday.
It is Saturday. Okay, so wow, it's not
Yeah,
that big of
we're
a
on the
time.
same day.
We're on the same
Yeah.
day. Okay, interesting. Okay.
so just as a heads up, I talked to some of the FSP folks.
Mhm.
Most of them went to this anti-fascist rally that popped up in Sacramento today, which was like a last-minute thing that happened. So if they don't show up, it's not because of ill will or anything. It's because most of them have been, got duties in there. Because apparently there's a white supremacist group holding a rally in Sacramento. So they are doing a counter protest.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool, cool, cool. Well, then I guess that means you can just go ahead and start. Thanks for coming. We're the United Front Committee for a Labor Party, and we are here to, try to make a Labor Party here in the US. And we have today Guillermo from Argentina, who's going to share his experiences with us. And thank you very much for coming.
Okay, comrades. Thanks for inviting us. And I speak in name, obviously, of the Partido Obrero to share some of our political experiences in Argentina and to discuss, what common conclusions we can draw abroad. Of course, not only from our experience, but from the experience of workers and revolutionaries in other countries, which enrich us as well. So these opportunities for political interchange are always valuable. That's why, obviously, when the comrades proposed a panel on the experience of the left front, we were interested and willing to carry it out. It's the intervention of the Partido Obrero and the left front in Argentina has a rich history, and I want to be able to stick to the time that was allotted by the organizers. So we'll try to center on some important points. First of all, in Argentina today, there's a very complicated situation because we have coming together a prolonged recession over almost 3 years. We have a very strong foreign debt crisis, which of course is a structural feature of Argentine economics and society. For those interested in it, we have an article in our last theoretical magazine on the economic structure of Argentina, and it's linked to foreign debt, to the strength of the dollar over the local currencies, and perpetual capital flight from Argentina as fixed features of our economy over the decades, which have led to a strong process of deindustrialization, of the strengthening of foreign capital, which compromises about 80% of the ownership of the companies that function in Argentina, and of a regular cycle of defaults and economic crisis, which are each default is used by foreign capital, imperialism, and the international organizations, IMF, World Bank, and so on, to to make a harder grip on Argentina. Of course, this situation has come together with the impact of the pandemic, not just as a sanitary situation, but of course with the capitalist management of the pandemic, which, though in the early days of last year, the local government seemed to be putting up an image of it complying with shutdown regulations and so forth to try to stop circulation. What really happened is that very quickly, about a month in, all economic activity was functioning again, and what chances there have been to preserve protocols of safety to avoid contagion have depended on sectors of workers that went into struggle to enforce this. As a general rule, the bosses, promoted just getting all economic functions back into work. This year, this has been extended to going back to classes, which particularly have generated a new wave of contagion, which in this last week is already stronger than in levels of new cases than it had been all last year. For the first time in the last days of the past week, the daily counts of new cases have gone over 20,000 cases a day, which is the local record. Yesterday was 24,000. It's been increasing every day, and which all evidence points to it being a result of all the economic activity and, of course, going back to classes. All ministers of the cabinet and the president have a ridiculous campaign which says that contagion only depends on personal decisions and personal care, that basically contagion has to do with young people who disregard the public rules and have parties or social meetings. But if you look at, I didn't prepare to bring you pictures and stuff, but if you looked at any train or bus, at rush hour going back and forth from work, it's absolutely full. And of course, the same thing with classrooms and so forth, even though there have been some measures to divide up class groups. So this, what they're saying, the ministers, is that in workplaces and schools, you don't get the disease. So it's a sort of magical thinking, which basically has to do with trying to not stop, capitalist profit from reproducing, because of course, what happens is to even go back to the sort of measures they took at the beginning of the pandemic to actually shut down some branches of the economic activity would necessitate discussing some form of subsidy, which they don't want to institute. Even with some measures they've taken, basically what they've done is shut down nighttime circulation and hours of bars and amounts of people that can sit in theaters, which are very relatively marginal things towards the general movement of the economy. And what they're rejecting is the possibility of new general subsidies for unemployed people, for people who are without work because of the pandemic, in a moment where the social crisis is picking up very strongly. We have about over 25% of the population fully unemployed, plus sub-occupation and so forth is above 30%. We have over 50% of people under the poverty line. Almost 5 million can't have incomes below just food, the basic food requirements. So it's a very difficult social situation, and the government, which is in a negotiation with the IMF, the Minister of Economy was in Washington 2 weeks ago negotiating with the IMF, and they are cutting back existing social programs and are dead set against including any new, apparently any new subsidies that could go directly to working people whose incomes are affected by the sanitary crisis and the situation. So this is the situation here. We had this week an interesting counterpoint between the government's presentation of its decree, which, as I told you, is basically that everything goes on as it was, except for nighttime circulation and a few recreational activities. And the following day, we had a huge march by the unemployed movement. I was looking for that video. Well, it started. I had sent it to the comrades previously. Maybe if someone wants to put up video or pictures, if not, I can show you later. And the flag, the central flag, these were thousands of unemployed workers who marched in Buenos Aires and all over the country. The Polo Obrero, which is the unemployed workers organization led by the Partido Obrero, was the main force, but it was a united front with other groups, because the policy that the Polo Obrero has been taking up is to call for united front action to all the groups who split with the government co-optation of unemployed workers organization, which is very strong. Some groups linked to who used to be linked to Chavismo or Maoists and so forth, basically run the Ministry of Social Welfare and its money, its funds, and use that to buy organizations, to co-opt them to the state. But even with that being the case, many organizations are splitting of these government co-opted organizations, because these co-opted organizations cannot represent the urgent demands for food, for work, for housing that are becoming very urgent in the neighborhoods. So what's happening is that the Polo Obrero is growing very fast, but also whole organizations are coming over or splitting and coming over to this united front for struggle in the Piquetero movement.
Almost trending.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, no, okay.
Quick
I
question.
thought someone
Sorry,
wanted
quick
to put in.
interruptions while
Yeah,
you're there.
sure.
You have a couple minutes left, but I did want to point out that I posted a link to that video that
Great.
you mentioned. Do you want me to share it with everyone now, or do you want to just let people watch it on their own?
Maybe without sound? What do you think? Or do you
Without
want,
sound?
I don't know if
It's up
people
to you.
understand Spanish because it's not translated.
I mean, I
Yeah.
know Ricardo does.
Okay,
Sure.
yeah, sure. No, put it on. We can watch
Cool.
it for a while and we can
Without
comment.
sound, so he can continue his presentation. Just
Okay,
to
yeah,
play
sure,
the
I can do
video.
that.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
What
Okay.
happened
Yeah.
what happened to the capital tax? I think it was 14 million or something.
Capital tax.
Point of order. Why don't we let him finish his presentation, and then we get into the questions and answers
Okay.
period.
Yeah, sure. Look, there wasn't really a capital tax, since you asked. There was something called a voluntary contribution, which was a very lukewarm version of a capital tax, which had a very low level and excluded companies as such. It only affected private individuals. So, for example, foreign companies operating in Argentina were excluded from this. It was a very, very limited law, which we abstained from in Congress. We criticized these limits. And what's happening now, I can look for the numbers, I don't remember, but I think they had said that it would affect 300,000 people. And it's about, I don't know, like a fifth of that were the actual people affected by that voluntary contribution. So it's, or contribution. So it was very lukewarm and basically, just for show, so to speak. Very partial. So basically, we are in the midst of a you can see the images there. That's the 9 de Julio. That's the main avenue in Buenos Aires, and you see very large columns of workers that were there this week. And basically that main flag, it's right there now, says there's no food, there's no work, there are no vaccines. So what we're trying to explain is that without income, quarantine doesn't work. So we need measures to really be able to apply quarantine, because without that, and there you see that, you know, of course there were measures taken to try to prevent contagion in the march itself and so forth. But basically it's a demand on the state, because it's showing that it's not taking the necessary measures for quarantine to work in Argentina, which include, of course, vaccination. Now, apart from some of the strikes that are going on, which have to do on the one hand with wages and on the other hand with sanitary problems. We have important teachers' strikes these weeks against classes which don't have conditions for them. We have health workers' strikes like the one I told you about in Neuquén with roadblocks. We've had factory strikes, for example, Bridgestone, which is one of the large tire companies, which is in a union, a national industrial union, which is headed by the PO, the SUTNA. And there were 6 cases of COVID there last week. And we went for a full strike of the factory because the US, Japanese owners of Bridgestone were against isolation of the workers who had been in contact with those 6 COVID cases. So we shut down the factory and went into a general strike to impose. And there is a situation where, although in occupied workers, the truce of the bureaucracy still is the general tonic, we have more and more struggles which are opening up. Well, which are some of these that I mentioned, and which most of which have been present in the plenary of the Coordinadora Sindical Clasista today. There is also a political campaign, which in this case, the Partido Obrero has been able to win the rest of the left front over to, which we think is politically very relevant, which has to do with vaccination. We put out our 10 demands, 10 points in general on the health situation, which start with a centralization of all private and public health system under control of the workers, and other points. But we've also, and there's a very particular point, which is the government says we can't get vaccines, right? The international market is very tied up. You know, the bigger countries, or the more powerful countries, the imperialist powers, have controlled all the available vaccines. But actually in our country, AstraZeneca has a laboratory that's producing the vaccines. But the owners of this lab, which include an Argentine businessman who's very closely connected to the government, the Ministry of Health has people who used to be his employees in all the main places, and Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim, who is in business with him. What they've done is the agreement supposedly is for those vaccines produced in Argentina to be then packaged, filtered and packaged in Mexico, and they were supposed to be used for Latin America, but they never came back. Last report on the millions of doses that left Argentina for the Mexican plant run by Slim said that those doses were then sent to US, and it's not clear if its final destination was US. Some say it then went to Australia, but there's a situation where AstraZeneca is not complying with the contract it had signed with the state. For example, a similar situation happened with Italy. Maybe you heard some months ago, Italy seized a shipment that was in its harbors because AstraZeneca had not complied with its contracts. So what we are calling for a public campaign is that the state has to seize this lab, all the doses that are there, which supposedly they say they can't package them in Argentina, which is a lie, because there exists the industrial capacity to finish these vaccines and package them exists, and to be able to use them for the situation in Argentina, and of course the neighboring countries, where I'm sure you're aware, Brazil has become one of the international centers for the health crisis, and there are new variants. There's a second new variant in Brazil these days, and in Chile and in Uruguay as well. The situation is very dire. So we think that a state-owned, workers-controlled, taking over those private labs who are speculating with their production instead of putting it in the hands of the population is very important. And we're doing a public campaign. We've done a rally at the that lab's gates. This has been covered by the national media. We're getting signatures, in a street campaign across the country, obviously in difficult conditions because of the increase of cases itself. So this is just a general, maybe mark of the situation and the intervention that we're carrying out these days. I want to point out, because I know it's a point of interest, of course, in the meeting itself, some things about the Left Unity Front. This is a left front of several forces, of the PO, and then the PTS, Izquierda Socialista, and the MST, who are three forces who come from Morenoism and the splits from the old MAS in the 80s. So some of them say they're still Morenoist. The PTS says they're not Morenoist anymore, but that's the general political line that they come from, which is a line that has traditionally been tailism to Peronism and other center-left formations in Argentina over the years. Of course, Morenoism itself was a part of Peronism for a few years in the 50s and 60s, and has in general tailed behind versions of social democracy, Peronism, or center-left movements in Argentina. Traditionally in Argentina, the left blocs between Morenoism and Stalinism were always had a program of some form of class collaboration or tailing different petty bourgeois and nationalist bourgeois tendencies. And in the left front, which included the PO since 2011, has been a split with these traditions, being a bloc centered around working class independence and with no collaboration with these bourgeois political forces. Of course, the pressures in this sense exist between the left front. They have not disappeared, but its common political action is centered on working class independence and intervention in the class struggle. Now, these forces in other countries are part of, in general, of what are called broad parties, or like the PSOL in Brazil, the NPA in France, or other groups which are basically electoral fronts. And in many cases, you can particularly see this, for example, in the PSOL in Brazil, which is tailing Lula, and that, the idea of an opposition front led by bourgeois sectors, or in Peru, where the Frente Amplio, the broad front, which several of these forces are a part of, have voted a government, after several of the popular upheavals that have brought down presidents that have even been repressive against the popular movement. After which, for example, the Izquierda Socialista, or Huitzi group, split with the front, but after voting in a bourgeois government which had these tendencies. So these pressures and tensions obviously exist within the FIT as well, and sometimes are blocked towards common action. For example, we have been pushing for a Congress of the left forces in Argentina to discuss an intervention on all these very critical situations, and this has not been carried out. Even rallies or political initiatives that we've proposed have in general not been taken up. For example, in November, it was a pretty critical moment of the crisis. The PO called for a rally. It proposed a common rally of the left front when the situation with the IMF was coming to a head, the negotiations, and there was a leap in the economic crisis. The others did not agree to do a common political initiative. The rallies held and called by the PO were very massive and important. And in those days, we sent you, some images and news about that. We had 24 rallies across the country in most major cities, but this was not carried out in common by the left front. In general, there's a block towards common action, and there's a tendency to try to leave the left front as an electoral bloc, which we think is negative, and we think does not allow the left front to develop its full potential and possibilities. So this is a polemic that we have. And in these days, and we see this has other expressions. It's not, some of this freezing the common action could be seen as electoral competition for places on the ballot, and some such factional infighting. But it also has other causes which have to do with political tailing of the bourgeoisie. One thing that I have not gone into in my exposition is that there is a very strong political polarization between two bourgeois blocs in Argentina, as in many Latin American countries. Basically, the Peronism has gathered most of the center left and the old left and many social movements around it, backing the Alberto Fernandez government. And then you have a right-wing bloc, which is, what that backed what was the government of Mauricio Macri, which is has a very strong following from a sector of the bourgeoisie, and has had popular demonstrations with thousands of people in the street against Alberto Fernandez, more or less in the libertarian kind of right-wing demonstrations that exist in different countries. The current president of Mauricio Macri's party, the PRO, Patricia Bullrich, who is practically an agent of the Mossad and the CIA, has been calling to make a national front against land seizures and doing campaigns against the Mapuche original people in the Patagonia, to try to set up a climate of pseudo-fascist or aristocratic strike groups against people who don't have houses and take over unoccupied land, which has been one of the forms of social conflict in our country. So there is definitely one of the trends within this right-wing coalition is a Bolsonaro-Trump kind of trend, and there's other more moderate sectors, but these are the sort of tendencies that are operating there. So the general situation is a very sharp polarization, which makes it more difficult often for the left to appear as an alternative. In this situation, we think that, first of all, the call for there to be a common rallies for the 1st of May called by the left fronts, and then a congress of all the left forces in Argentina is very important to appear as a political alternative. We are, the Argentine left, and I would say the PO in particular, are very present in the struggles of the working class, occupied and unemployed. You've seen the other days, I sent to several comrades the occupation of the Ministry of Education by youths from the neighborhoods who were saying that without computers, Wi-Fi, and so on, it's impossible to continue classes. And that last year there had been 3 million students who deserted, and we did not want to repeat this. So the upsurge of the Piquetero movement is even reigniting the student movement, so to speak, and it's part of a more general process of struggle. But we also need to appear as a political alternative to show that we can have a solution for the crisis in the country. Of course, not paying the debt, control of foreign commerce workers, control of foreign commerce, nationalization of the bank. These are measures that can stop the recurring economic tragedies and the social crisis of our country. We can occupy and put to work all the factories that are being left by the bosses, which is something that's starting up again. Even clinics are shutting down in the midst of a health crisis, showing that, of course, as with the vaccines, that the capitalist management of the crisis is a contradiction in itself. It does not have a solution for the masses. But so we are in a discussion that we need to have a common campaign and platform of all the left that calls itself independent from the state and the bourgeoisie, the more important fractions of which, or groups of which, are the left front in Argentina. So this is the debate that we are having. When I said that there was tailing of bourgeois tendencies, I'll give you a few examples. The MST has been saying that the left front should be opened up to disillusioned sectors of Peronism. this has been statements they've been making to the media recently. So we see this together with not advancing in common activities as, a show of what they can be looking at politically. The PTS, which is the left voice in the US, have been putting out articles about what the Kirchnerismo calls lawfare against businessmen linked to corruption under the Kirchnerista government. Not debating actually the corruption in itself, but trying to, basically what they say is that the right-wing opposition is worse than the government. They put a valuation, and that this bourgeois nationalist government is not a direct representation of capitalism. So it would be like a lesser evil, almost like, like Maoism. It says it's not the central enemy, so to speak. So they have this sort of differentiation, which we see as a flirtation with nationalism, maybe for electoralist purposes, which we are denouncing publicly, and we're saying this is not the way the left front should intervene. We have to be based on an independent policy of the working class, and the bourgeois nationalist government, with its contradictions, of course, is not the form that the bourgeoisie would want to use to govern, but it is in several occasions, and in Argentina after the Macri government debacle, it was the best possible government for the bourgeoisie to try to control mobilization and protests. So it is a useful tool of the bourgeoisie, and it has had the support of the bourgeoisie to put up a government. The idea of a better or worse than the right wing is an abstraction. This is the government that the bourgeoisie is using to govern Argentina, and in that way, we have to consider the policies it is carrying it out, which are disastrous for the working class. And I've given you, I think, several examples in this case, have to be the center of our mobilization and our agitation. We cannot fire against the right-wing opposition as the main enemy, which the PTS in its publications and its campaigns seems to be centering. Okay, so this said, I want to say a final thing, that we do not think that these struggles in Argentina are completely different from those that are being carried out in different countries. We think, and we've said, that we see these struggles and the way they are reaching ahead, which may be before or after elections that are this year. And of course, the pandemic seems to, for some moments, complicate the class struggle, and it being, going into full effect and demonstrations and so on. But contradictorily, it also fuels it, because it heightens the contradictions. So sometimes, maybe some months the cases are up and it's difficult for class struggle to appear more openly. But when time passes, the contradictions have not subsided, but they're becoming more and more sharp. And we see this in popular rebellions in Peru, in strong movements in Paraguay against the government, which had to do with corruption and vaccination as well. We see a general strike in Haiti. So, and we think, with the conditions of rebellion and upsurge in working class conflicts, with all its contradictions in the US as well, that the time, as we have discussed with the comrades from the United Front, is more necessary than ever for there to be a coming together and a common collaboration of revolutionaries across the continent. That's why we think that coming out with the position for a new conference of the working class movement and the left in Latin America and the US is a need. We think this is an important task. We think no single current, or political tendency has the critical mass in this moment to call towards all militants of the revolutionary left. And we think a united front initiative like last year's conference, which had over 50 organizations from the continent participate, has to have a continuity. We think this is a place where the sharp discussions of strategy that exist in the left between independent working class activity and dissolution behind broad tent organizations and the like becomes sharper. And it's good that these things be debated, but not to debate them in a factional way, but to come together, discuss, take common action and struggle. And of course, these strategic differences will appear. We see in the States the same, with much of the left going behind the DSA, which is a channel inside the bourgeois imperialist Democratic Party, and different comrades discussing, as you yourself say, we need an independent working class party or an independent labor party. Okay, this sort of discussion is the discussion that in Latin America goes along all the different countries to what attitude to take towards Chavismo, the PT in Brazil, or each of these, or Kirchnerismo in Argentina, or each of these formations. So we think it is important to give the conclusions of an experience like the Left Front in Argentina and the insertion that the Partido Obrero and Trotsky's forces, to some point in general, have in Argentina, which we think is an important, is something that is important for revolutionaries and Trotskyists in different places to know and to be aware of, and we're trying to communicate it more systematically, sending information and newsletters and and whatever that can reach you. And at the same time, we think it has to be part of a debate, the conclusions of which are more general, and an important part of those conclusions is the need for an independent working class party in the United States, and for, of course, to work to rebuild a revolutionary international. So I'll stop here and we can open up other interventions in debate.
I actually have a question.
Well,
Carol, can we hold those for a second? Can we hold those for a second? Because I think we wanted to say thank you. And Steve, I think you're talking next, yes? Or should we allow for questions first?
No, I was going to talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, first of all, on behalf of our committee, United Front Committee for the Labor Party, I want to thank Guillermo for making a presentation. And the reason we asked him to make the presentation was, I think that despite all the difficulties in Argentina, you have been able to get a bloc together of socialist, of workers' organizations acting together. And this is part of what we see the task in the United States, and that is United Front tactic, United Front work. And I think internationally, the need for united fronts in the working class is absolutely critical today in light of the danger of rise of fascism and the great economic, political crisis that we're facing. So our committee, which is only a young committee, was formed around the idea of a united front for a labor party, which means that we have differences in our committee. It's not a revolutionary party. It's a committee of those who want to build a mass labor party in the United States. And we have views about what the program should be, but we don't put them as an ultimatum to workers about what kind of labor party should be built. I mean, the program of a labor party, that is. The history of the United States has a long history of a fight for a labor party. William Silvis, actually, before the Civil War, was fighting for a labor party, a national labor party. And there have been struggles, many struggles for labor parties. And during the 30s in the United States, the SWP was fighting for a labor party, but the CIO, which was a major industrial union, the leadership of that were pro-capitalist. And after the war, there was a purge of leftists in the unions in the United States, a political purge of communist, leftist, Trotskyists, and the Teamsters, who led the general strike in Minneapolis, were purged out with the union leadership, the government, and the bosses together, uniting. So the decline of the strength of the unions in the United States is a directly result of their policy of the trade unions, which have a policy of business collaboration and not fighting the capitalists ideologically and politically. For example, the implementation of NAFTA came with the Democrats uniting with the Republicans, the Democratic President Clinton, and the deregulation of the economy of airlines and others was done by Democrats. It was actually started by Carter, who deregulated the airlines. Deregulation was never fought politically and ideologically by the unions, because it would have meant fighting the Democratic Party, which was supporting deregulation. Also privatization. The unions, the Democrats have united with the Republicans, No Child Left Behind in testing, commodification of education, and the leadership of the AFT and the NEA support charter schools, privately run charter schools, as long as they're union. So you have a capitulation, ideological capitulation by the union bureaucracy that they don't want to fight capitalism because it would mean politically mobilizing and educating their members. So you have what we have now is an economic crisis. The pandemic has shown really the contradictions of capitalism. I mean, over 500,000 have died. You don't have national health care. The Democrats, in fact, in the Democratic Party, not only was it the Democratic Party who opposed national health care, but even Randy Weingarten, the president of the Teachers Union, voted against national health care, and the Democratic National Committee, where she's a member, even though her members are being killed and coerced back on the job. Now the crisis, the decline of US imperialism has led to a split in the capitalist class. The rising of Trump is a direct result of the decline of capitalism and the marginalization of the working class, workers who've lost their jobs. There was a real income decline over the last 30 years of workers in the United States. That frustration, that anger has been used by the right wing, Trump and fascists and others, to attack the government. But the Democrats and Republicans are both responsible for these economic policies and the deindustrialization of the United States. So this split in the capitalist class is reflected in a section of the capitalist class moving far to the right against bourgeois democracy. And the coup that took place, the attempted coup and the insurrection, was an example of that, where these right-wing forces led by Trump said, we're going to prevent a transition of power. And we're going to thwart Biden coming into office by stopping the vote, the certification of the vote, and invading the Capitol. First time in the history of the United States. In fact, the crisis in the capitalist class is the biggest that we've had since the Civil War in the United States, where they're calling for war on each other. And this is a very serious thing, and it requires a fight to mobilize the working class and to organize the working class to defend itself, but also against racist attacks, the escalation, and a drive towards war. Because combined with the economic crisis is the drive for imperialist war, encirclement of China, encirclement of Russia, and whipping up xenophobia, which has led to attacks on immigrants, Latinos, and Asians in the United States. It's a direct result of the drive towards imperialist war. So in the light of this, the unions have been, union bureaucracy has been to get the Democrats in power. And now you have the Democrats in control of the Senate, the Congress, and the executive. But they don't really want, and they're incapable, and they're opposed to really a program, a socialist program, a workers program. They haven't pushed national health care, including Sanders, who was supported by the DSA and others. And this, one of the issues that we want to fight for is the mobilization of the working class independently of the Democrats and Republicans. Now, an important aspect of that was the fight over the attempted coup, because Trump said he was going to try to stop the certification, and he mobilized people. There were labor councils around the country, in Madison, Wisconsin, and in Seattle, and the Vermont AFL-CIO called for a general strike against an attempted coup. And Trump, the head of the AFL-CIO, said that they couldn't vote on that. That was out of bounds. And now we understand that the AFL-CIO is doing an investigation of the Vermont AFL-CIO and may try to take away their charter, put them under trusteeship. So this shows that there's divisions in the trade union movement, and our committee, United Front Committee for Labor Party, support the right for a general strike, the fight for a general strike. In fact, our committee was the only committee nationally out of all the left groups to have a rally against the coup and to focus on working class action, a general strike action. We had a rally in January and also in March, against the threats of a coup and the call for mobilization, a general strike, and also for a labor party, for a political alternative, a political solution in the working class. So the struggle, in our view, is not going to be solved by the elections. The elections are not going to solve the social crisis, the economic crisis in this country. An example of that is a struggle in Amazon, organizing Amazon, where the union bureaucracy and And the Democrats said, well, they should join. But the reality is they allowed Bezos to intimidate and terrorize the workers, to conspire to prevent them from having the right to vote. And there was no mobilization. There were no mass rallies. There was the Southern Workers Assembly, which organized over 50 actions in February, March to support the Bessemer workers. We participated in them. But the AFL-CIO and the most labor councils did not support them because they're afraid of mobilizing their members. They're afraid of actually bringing their members together. And that's a danger to them because they support business unionism and they're pro-capitalist. The ideology of the trade unions in the United States are pro-capitalist. So we see the fight for the Labor Party as a way of uniting the working class and on class issues, and also for the political independence of the workers against the support for the Democrats and a Democratic mass Labor Party. And on May Day, there's going to be a rally in San Francisco. They're bringing the Secretary of Treasury, the AFL-CIO. The ILW is going to lead that. The ILW Local 10 has said they support a Labor Party. So it's one union, but they haven't organized to do that. But this March, we want to participate in. We want to get union contingents around the issue of the right of workers to organize, but also against the racist attacks, against war, in support of the Palestinians, against the attack on Palestinians, and for an international struggle against capitalism and imperialism. So we see that as important, and it's a way of uniting the workers. And that's how we see the fight for the Labor Party. We're trying to work in DSA. If you're in DSA, we're not opposed to that. Fight for a Labor Party in DSA. If you're in organizations, and there are organizations who call themselves a Trotskyist, like Socialist Alternative, but they're not actually fighting in the unions for a Labor Party against the union bureaucracy. Because it's one thing to say you're for a Labor Party, and it's another thing to fight the union bureaucracy directly, politically, like my convention is going to happen, the CWA. There are other conventions at the AFT are people who say that they're Trotskyists or for a Labor Party actually fighting in these unions against the bureaucracy and against business unionism. That is a critical question. That's something we have to organize to do. And I think that there are great opportunities because this political crisis, social and economic crisis, is raised to workers. What is their future? What future do they have? There's still mass unemployment, large mass unemployment. They're attacking teachers. Public workers are under attack with privatization. Gig workers, the gig economy and is what faces millions of workers. So only really the mobilization, the independent mobilization of workers. Now, the question is the unions. Our view is we have to fight in unions against the bureaucracy for a program to defend workers. At the same time, we don't oppose independent unions. If workers build other organizations, assemblies, and other unions, we support that as well. So we don't have only one policy as far as the working class. There are many ways the workers will fight, but this central way now is to fight in the unions and to fight to defend workers on the job against attacks that they face, against racist attacks, hanging nooses, against against the bosses who are trying to bust the unions. One of the things about the pandemic is it's weakened the trade union movement. For example, in San Francisco, there is a janitor strike. There's an excess vacancy level in the buildings in New York, San Francisco, Chicago, because the workers who can go online have gone online. They're not coming back for a while, maybe never. And that means they're going after the janitors union, the SEIU members. So this is going to lead to a growing class struggle in the United States. And the union bureaucracy, of course, is afraid of uniting all these workers together who face similar attacks. And that's what the United Front Committee for a Labor Party can do. And I'm glad we're having this discussion about the lessons and the struggles in Argentina, because we do have to unite with the workers in Argentina, the education workers, all the lessons of struggles of workers of Argentina need to be brought back into the United States. Workers have to know what's happening in Argentina and the class struggle there, so we can unite education workers with education workers in Argentina, so we can have a united struggle. That is part of the requirement of the fight for a Labor Party, because we really don't see a Labor Party as an American question. It's an international question of uniting with workers around the world, in Mexico and in every other country. Thank you.
Great work, Steve. Good talk. Good talk. I'd now like to open the floor for questions. Quick reminder, we are going to use a stack method unless you have like a direct response. Also, I'm gonna time you for 3 minutes per response and / reply if that's okay with everyone. So does anybody have any questions for, let's go with Guillermo first.
I think Carol had a question.
Yeah, I think Carol, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very short question. There was whatchamacallit, an election in Ecuador where a socialist just won as president. I know nothing about this guy's politics, and probably it's, you know, more like the socialists of, you know, in general, right-wing, you know, politics where people call themselves socialists but aren't really. But I was wondering if, Guillermo, do you have any relationship? What's going on? Do you know what's going on in Ecuador? And do you have it? What's your relationship with the mass movements in other countries in Latin America? Are you building an international sort of, is what my question is.
Okay, should I answer this?
Yes, sorry, yes, you
Okay,
should answer me after.
so question answered, great. Look, we have an article up yesterday in Prensa Obrera, prensaobrera.com, which I know maybe not everybody reads Spanish directly, but I'm sure with at least a Google Translate, you can get a gist of. And just so you know, both our website and our YouTube channel have daily updates. So we try to have a pretty large international coverage as well. And we have an article yesterday on the upcoming ballotage, which is either today or tomorrow. So that's you know, the ballotage is a runoff, right? No, well, it's the second election that is only among the two most voted candidates. So what you have in Ecuador is that the successor of Correa, who was, you know, the president in a sort of Chavez, Evo Morales, bourgeois nationalist line, Lenin Moreno, had a split with Correa, a political split, and appeared as a more direct government of the bourgeoisie, abandoning, you know, even demagogic appearances of bourgeois nationalism. So instead of other countries like where there was a coup and Lula was thrown out and Temer was in or whatever, there it appeared as a split within the bourgeois nationalist movement. What happened is there was a big popular uprising, 2019, where against several measures that were taken by the Lenin Moreno government. The guy's first name is Lenin. He comes from a leftist family, but that's not his politics are different. Lenin Moreno. So what happened is the workers in Quito came together with the peasants from the National Peasant Confederation. They took over the city. There was a big popular rebellion, but they didn't throw out the government. So this crisis has more or less continued. And in the election, the right-wing candidates came in very low. The Correa-backed bourgeois nationalist candidate came in first. And first ballot counts showed that the one who had come in second was the candidate backed by the Peasant Confederation. But then, in what they denounced as a fraud, they were left out, and now the runoff is between Correa's candidate and the right wing. So they got left out of the second round of elections, and they're calling to null the votes tomorrow. This Peasant Confederation has had very important interventions in the class struggle and in popular rebellions over the last few decades, but it does not have an independent policy. It has even backed the right wing against Correa, the bourgeois, like right-wing candidates against Correa in past elections. So it has and they have indigenista politics. How do you say this? You know,
indigenous.
Yeah, indigenous. You say that? Okay, that's easy.
Yes. Just so you know, you have about 30 seconds left. Is that okay?
Tendency. Maybe that's a general presentation of the struggle tomorrow. So it's interesting in the sense that this peasant sector at least appears as a crisis between the more like the polarization between the two bourgeois sectors, but it doesn't really represent an independent policy of the working class, even though it has been a part of popular rebellions and is probably a channel for tendencies to mobilize and to fight and to struggle with whichever bourgeois government comes out of these elections. We'll see what happens, but they are calling for a mass blank vote protest this weekend.
Awesome. Thank you. Is that that's your time? Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And then maybe later at some point we'll talk about the international question as well. I got caught up with it.
No, it's all good. I can tell you're definitely passionate about what you're talking about, so it's really interesting. If no one has a direct response, I think our next person on stack is Ali.
Thank you, Comrade, and thank you, Comrade Guillermo, for this awesome presentation, and also Comrade Steve for his part of the presentation. I have a question more directly about FIT. And I think that's like the core lesson that I personally am seeking to learn from this discussion. As you have said, there are many tendencies within the FIT, some of which the PO is somewhat diametrically opposed to what they are saying, and for good reasons. Despite this, though, FIT has been able to maintain a unity, I think, over a decade, and has been doing like really amazing mass actions, some of which we have showed in this panel. And I am wondering like how exactly these differences and oppositions within the FIT are worked out. How are they discussed in a way that doesn't harm the unity? Not for unity's sake, but there is a unity that is maintained, and it is very in sharp contrast to a lot of sectarianism that we see here in the United States. So I would like to learn more about that.
Okay. First of all, not all of these activities that we've seen are a direct result of common work of the FIT. For example, in the unemployed movement, neither the PTS nor Izquierda Socialista participate. They have a sectarian position towards this. They consider it ideologically inferior to intervening in the trade union struggles, which we think is it's a very sharp political mistake. First of all, because work in the unions, which we also think is key, and I subscribe to most of what Steve said about, or probably all of what Steve said about work in the unions, and both the need to work for a new leadership in the union, ousting the trade union bureaucracy, and also work, in phenomena that appear outside the unions, or organizing unorganized workers that have different expressions. And we, in Argentina, have a pretty rich history of intervention along all those different lines. But in the union work, bourgeois ideology weighs as heavily as in unemployed workers, but they have a sectarian position. So there are political differences. We discuss these political differences openly, but we defend the existence of a bloc which has a program which is centered on the fight for a workers' government and political independence from the bourgeois formations. And since this has won a certain political place in the life of Argentina, splitting it would have a very negative political effect, probably for everybody if the front actually split, but certainly for anybody who would put themselves outside of it. For example, a group split with the PO about 2 years ago at this point, which includes Jorge Altamira, who was a founding leader of the PO, with a sectarian position towards the United Front of the FIT and other United Front activity, for example, in the trade union, the Plenario Sindicalismo Combativo, which is a united front of left-wing and anti-bureaucratic trade union sectors, and in the Piquetero movement, with different sectarian and propagandistic positions. this has led the group they have formed to be a very small group with very little political influence, because it has placed itself outside of presenting a common bloc against bourgeois forces. So we definitely see the pitfall of opportunism and broad front, but also sectarianism, propagandism, and so forth. So there's no, there's no rule book that would that prevents against splits and problems, but we see that the left has won a political place. We have shown that there can be a revolutionary use of parliamentarism to promote class struggle and not to be co-opted by the bourgeois state. And we have an ample history and track record of this, which you can definitely read about, or we can interchange, or or have a correspondence on, because getting into the nitty-gritty of it will be beyond the scope of this talk, probably. But we can share a lot of information on that, and we think this is a conquest of the working class in activism, and splitting it would be the death politically for organizations who carry it out. So even though there are tensions, these have not led to a split in the political bloc that has been formed, because it has won a concrete place. It is like, for example, when there is a trade union, a leftist trade union bloc, and it wins a union, there can be infighting and there can be problems, but there's usually a shared awareness that if you don't work together to defend this position that the working class has won, you will be judged for this by activists and by those in struggle. This causes a certain responsibility. So I think this sort of pressure exists towards the front, towards the forces of the left front, to defend the FIT as as a political conquest of the working class and the sectors in struggle in Argentina.
Hold your thoughts there. I think you've hit time, if that's okay with you. Fantastic.
Yeah, I stopped there.
Okay, you stop there. Sorry. Oh man, it's just, you have such it's really interesting to listen to. I'm sorry that I'm not cutting you a little earlier, but anywho's, let's see. Next on our stack is Ricardo.
Yes, congratulations to comrades Guillermo and Steve for their presentations. Thank you very much. I just want to ask a few short questions in my intervention. In the government right now, there are a couple of leftist parties, the Communist Party and the Maoist parties. So could you comment on this class collaboration politics of these Stalinist organizations, and how was, for example, in the rest of Latin America, this had led into tragedy and retreating, damaging class, the levels of class struggle. Number two, in the US, there are many Latin American nationalists and even some American leftists that think that Cristina Kirchner is like this great, anti-imperialist, politician. And actually, we know that she has, proposed a meeting a couple of months ago or a month ago of Argentinian capitalists and bourgeois politicians to, satisfy the demands of the foreign debt. The third question is, I learned through the I was watching on YouTube Argentinian television, and I learned that Admiral Craig Fuller, the combat commander of the United States Southern Command, visited Argentina in the last couple of days. Could you comment of the United States military relations with the Argentinian government? And finally, but not least, on the 2nd of April, it was the anniversary of the Malvinas War. So have you got why there were activities commemorating this and condemning, the junta, claiming and raising the right of Argentina to sovereignty over the British imperialism in the question of the Malvinas Islands. And fine, well, I think I'll leave it right there. Thank you.
So how many minutes do I get for this? Ricardo raised many interesting points.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. Yeah, that's normally we've been giving 3, so why don't we go with 6? 6?
No, it's okay. It's okay. I was just kidding. We'll discuss some of the things, and we'll try to do it in the time. Yes, actually, Ricardo has made comments which are valid on their own, and not necessarily questions to some extent, but things he might be interested in talking about, because effectively there's a long history, of course, of leftists in the Stalinist tradition forming class collaboration blocs, which goes back to the Popular Front politics of the Stalinized Comintern, which had, as some of you may know, in the Argentine Communist Party, not the most important communist party from the point of view of its insertion in the class struggle, but yes, probably its main force in the Stalinization of the Latin American communist parties. Vittorio Codovilla, who was a Stalinist commissar in the Spanish Civil War, for example. And this Stalinized Communist Party has also been strategic in the isolation of Che Guevara, which led up to his assassination by the military in Bolivia. So they've and in Argentina they've always and they've for many decades promoted the dissolution behind different bourgeois blocs, but with the particularity that faced with Peronism, their first policy for many years was to side with the right-wing opposition against Peronism. This had to do with, this was in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War. So Peronism was presented as the fascist side, and they sided with the democratic allied faction that was backed by the US Embassy. So in Peronism, which was a big defining moment in the life of the Argentine working class, the PC and the Socialist Party had a bloc with the traditional bourgeois parties against Peronism in an electoral campaign where the main speaker in the rallies was Spruill Braden, who was the U.S. ambassador in Argentina. This is an important example of the sort of policies which also included backing the last military dictatorship and saying it was a democratic dictatorship, because while they were committing genocide here, they had certain important economic agreements with the Soviet Union, which led for the Communist Party to have a level of political defense of the last military dictatorship. So these sort of policies have led to a growing, how do you say this? The coming apart of the Communist Party. It is not an important political force. What is left of the Communist Party is an apparatus that depends on the Cuban and Venezuelan embassies, but it doesn't have an important gravitation on political life. And about a decade ago, dissolved into Kirchnerismo, but without much important political activity. There are other leftist groups which are more important, and especially in the social organizations or unemployed organizations. There's the Revolutionary Communist Party, which comes from Maoism, but also defends Stalin and has an important force in the neighborhoods. There are Chavista organizations, and this is actually the general situation in much of Latin America, where a lot of the left has dissolved into the different bourgeois, either sometimes right-wing opposition against nationalists, and most of them in internationalism. The difference in Argentina is that for the common audience, for the common public, the left is independent Trotskyism. It's not the Communist Party. No one thinks of them as the Communist Party. Maoism, most people don't know those organizations are Maoist. The party exists as a as a shell inside of these broad front organizations where they, they have a state funds and they have a big organization, but they're not really known as political parties, whereas the Partido Obrero is a household name and the left front is a household name. And in general, if you say the left, people are gonna think of the fit. So that's a political conquest where these have sort of faded away and are satellites around Peronismo, but there is an independent left. And then I'll take the Malvinas one. The PO stance on Malvinas, we've published again. Next year is going to be, 40 years, the 40-year anniversary. And we defend the stance taken under the military dictatorship, which offered no political support for the adventure launched by the Galtieri dictatorship, but had a profound anti-imperialist stance that, based on on Trotsky's writings and on the defense of the national question, the NATO and the UK have no claim over the Malvinas Islands. Those islands are Argentine, but we also explain that if not only we denounced the adventure as a way for the military dictatorship to try, which had just faced a general strike against its crimes against the Argentine working class and was looking for a way out of this political crisis, and effectively after it lost the war, it had to go because human rights demonstrations and workers' demonstrations were on the rise. But also, if it really wanted to win against imperialism, the first thing it had to do was expropriate British and American banks in Buenos Aires, take the economic measures to defend the country, accept the proposals from Latin American countries to do a common defense against imperialism, none of which were taken as measures by the junta, by the military junta, showing that their anti-imperialism was in word and not in deed, and that the kids, the young soldiers sent to the islands were sent to die without any serious preparation for a clash with the British Armada. So this position, which is we have put up on our site again recently, and for Ricardo or anybody interested, are documents which are available and which we think hold up as a revolutionary position on on the Malvinas War in particular, and in general regarding the conflicts between imperialist countries and semi-colonial ones. Went over a bit, but at least we answered two of them.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Well, I mean, if there's no one else, I don't believe there's anyone else on Stack. So if we would agree, you can keep going.
But maybe Steve wants to comment on these issues or on other ones, or yeah. I don't know if there's anybody else.
Steve, you're muted.
I think, we support the fight against U.S. imperialism, and which supported the British in the Malvinas. So, that's our responsibility here. One thing I want to talk about, and I think it's important, is that I understand that the PO and your supporters in Latin America are calling for a conference, hemisphere conference. And what I see as critical, and it's really not happened, is a linking up of the North American working class with the Central and Latin American working class. And for example, in Mexico, you have a situation where through NAFTA, they recolonized Mexico, and U.S. multinationals are running Mexico, where they have slave labor on the border at Driscoll's. These farm workers who are indigenous people have been pulled off the land because of NAFTA and now are working $7 a day in Mexico. So I think we need to develop direct links between the workers in Latin America, Central America, with the United States. So how do you see, I know you've initiated a call for a conference, and I think that's critical. How do you see linking up, building an international working class movement?
Yeah, this is linked to something Carol asked a while ago and got left out. Look, there are a couple of comrades here, Ali and Mehmet, they know this full well. We have been part of a revolutionary organization whose program and method we uphold. and we think has to be reorganized and carried out, which is the CRFI. The program was based on a few points, which were then developed into a full program in a Congress we had in Buenos Aires in 2004. The main points were the continuity of the revolutionary epoch begun by the October Revolution, the denunciation of all working class collaboration and popular fronts politics, including the liquidation of Trotskyism, which the so-called United Secretariat of the Fourth International and other groups have carried out as their policy. So we defend that program, and we have been working with organizations and revolutionaries, in particular in Latin America. For example, for last year's conference, we signed a common document with organizations from Mexico, Costa Rica, Brazil, Peru, and Uruguay, among other countries, which was a common position within the conference. Not where there, of course, were very different political positions that were present there. In a United Front activity, we were able to put together a revolutionary position with about 10 organizations. And we're doing, of course, also international work, which stems from our work in Argentina in the sense of the immigrant communities here from Bolivia, from Peru, and from Paraguay. And we're organizing from their communities here to try to strengthen revolutionary organizations in those countries as well, in the face of the very, the very sharp clashes in the class struggle that have been lived there. So we think that the reconstruction of the international is a necessary task, and that this has to be put in the center. And the reorganization of the PO after the political crisis caused by the split with the liquidationist fraction headed by Jorge Altamira has taken international work as a top priority, not just of our leadership, but of our party. And we think that it is important for organizations, no matter small, big, or whatever place, to say that we need to work together, and to in this sense, the conference that we are proposing, not just between the political organizations as such, but also to promote internationalism and international collaboration, the working class movement, in the sense that Steve has said. Our comrades in the gig economy, as you call it, or the delivery workers, for example, in the apps platforms, have been coordinating international strikes in comrades of over 10 countries, mostly in Latin America, but growingly also in different places of the world. We have been part of the international women's strikes. We have, for example, in Bridgestone, where we have a leadership position, and when we have conflicts, we've been appealing to try to do common campaigns with the workers in the other countries of this same international company. We've also done common activities of workers of General Motors in Argentina and Brazil. So we definitely think that an international conference of the hemisphere of the working class and left is not just for the political organizations, but maybe it's something we can discuss with the ILWU or other class struggle unions. So in that sense, we think a call and a position from your United Front Committee, which we have discussed some time ago, would be interesting, not just as part of the politics between the international Trotskyist groups or whatever, but to try to take these needs to the working class organizations that you have a relationship with in the US as well. And to try to, as you were saying, the teachers' unions, so on, to try to look for a ground for common internationalist activity in the working class.
Awesome. I think Ricardo was on stack first, and then Ali.
Actually, congratulations on the gathering that you guys were able to organize for immigrant workers in Argentina the other day. I was watching something on YouTube. It was actually the left in this country is not able to do that, gather large groups of immigrants for their defense. One question that I want to ask is it's known the rivalry between, the Chilean bourgeoisie, the Argentinian bourgeoisie that is exploited by the US and British imperialism. And the other day I was even reading that Sebastián Piñera, the president of Chile, was trying to provoke last year some sort of a clash as how can, or how has been the joint work, of the Chilean Trotskyists and Argentinian Trotskyists to prevent these, new regional rivalries to, make the working class of each country compete against each other and to combat chauvinism.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the bourgeoisie has tried to promote this, and even in the last moment of crisis of a military dictatorship, it was on the verge of armed conflict with Chile over some border disputes. This does, though it appears now and again, especially in the areas close to the border in the Patagonia, it is not a popular sentiment. Popular sentiment in the Andes region close to Chile, and popular movements that have been very important over the last time have to do with the need for land, and of course the Mapuche population, which is on both sides of the border and faces state repression on both sides of the border. The opposition to fracking and different mining operations, which have a terrible effect on the environment and which have led to mass movements at the end of last year in Mendoza and this year in Chubut, for example, and which have in both cases stopped local legislation, which is going to allow this sort of mining. And there have been very strong movements this year because of the fires in Chubut. Chubut and Rio Negro, there were huge fires, which the state did not put resources in to stop, and which led to thousands of people losing their homes. The president went to the area and he was chased out with rocks. That was the popular reception he got there. So there's a strong movement which has everything to do with clashing with the capitalists who are exploiting that area, and especially the international capital, which is not Chilean, it's not Mapuche, it's Benetton, it's Lewis, who's a US millionaire, who have between them and a few others bought out large sectors of the Patagonia, including whole lakes, for example, or mountains that cannot be accessed. Yes, there's also a Chinese base also in the area, in Neuquén. The oil, the mining interests, the land are seized by foreign capital that is not Chilean. And of course, for the revolutionary left, but not just for us, these are popular movements, environmental movements, and so on. The agenda is very much to discuss this and not to accept, the fight with Chile doesn't play a direct role. We have a collaboration. There is as well a Chilean organization, I forgot about them, which was part of this political document last year, Fuerza 18 Octubre, which was founded with the Popular Rebellion in 2019, with a direct collaboration of comrades from Argentina who were there in Chile during the rebellion, collaborating with the formation of this political organization. And this is a tradition which goes back many decades. For example, Marcelo Gramar, which is one of the founding members of Política Obrera, and his wife, Esther Quitay, went from Argentina to Chile during the government of Salvador Allende, contributed with the founding of a Trotskyist organization there, and Esther was a political prisoner of the Chilean coup till a movement could free her and other comrades from Argentina. So this collaboration is very much part of our history and our political tradition.
Awesome. I believe Ali is on stack. Is next. Yes, Ali's on stack next. We are getting close to 1:30. So Carol, I'm unsure. I mean, depending, is your comment a long one or
It's very short, actually.
Oh, okay. So then Ali, then response, and then you, and then response, and then that shall be the end of our panel. Okay. Awesome. Fantastic. Go
Steve
Ali.
has something to
I
say.
was going to make a closing comment. Yeah. I was gonna make a
Okay.
closing comment. Yeah,
Is it a quick one?
short. Yeah,
Okay,
but
sure.
after all the speakers.
Okay, cool. So Ali, Guillermo, Carol, Guillermo, Steve. Yes. Awesome.
Actually, it's mine is not so much a question as more of a comment, and I would like to make it on behalf of UFCLP, as we have discussed with Comrade Guillermo and other comrades from PO. We are definitely in favor of a hemispheric conference of workers organizations and revolutionary organizations across Latin America, Central America, and North America. I just wanted to use this. We haven't been able to come up with a statement yet, unfortunately. However, I just wanted to use this very platform to make the first public statement of the USCLP in favor of such conference. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Awesome. Maybe we can talk offline a little bit later about maybe organizing that. So cool. So Carol?
Yeah, mine is really quick too, and it has to do with what Guillermo was talking about in terms of the environment. I mean, if there's anything, especially in Latin America, that's, the Amazon is being burnt down everywhere in Brazil and Peru and Ecuador, all over Ecuador. The thing that I was thinking about in terms of China was that China has now intervened in Ecuador and is, causing the ruination of the Amazon also there. So this is clearly an international question, and it's not just about the American or Western bourgeoisie. It also has to do with China, and we have to begin to develop this strategy to talk about the environmental impact everywhere, but also just I don't want to demonize China, because the United States is already doing that, but we have to make sure that we also discuss the question of, Chinese intervention in Latin America, which is becoming a much larger issue than it had been in the past. So that was my thing.
Okay. Does anyone have any?
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry. No, please.
I'm just gonna say if anyone has any responses, but yes, go.
No.
Please respond.
Maybe someone else can chip in too.
Well, I think, our position, and we have an international campaign for the Namibian miners, is not against the Chinese workers, but against the Chinese bureaucrats who run these corporations that are buying up, recolonizing Africa and other countries around the world. In fact, I think we're for unity with Chinese workers. We just had a discussion before this meeting with the delegation of Namibian workers in Longshoremen. And the issue of, the Chinese workers are being brought to Namibia to replace Namibian workers. So what do? I mean, you don't want to attack Chinese on the one hand. On the other hand, you have to work with these workers are being brought in to undermine the conditions of the Namibian workers by the Chinese corporations. So you have to have a united front. You have to unite with those workers, but also you have to, I think, fight to unite with the Chinese workers, who are the largest working class of the world. And it's critical that we have an orientation towards the Chinese working class, the most powerful force of the world working class at this point. Is critical and key. But what I wanted to end with is that part of rebuilding an international working class movement is an international communication network. And we have this technology, which we're using right now, and we can do more of it to link up with workers in Turkey, workers in Argentina, South Africa, Korea, all over the world. So we see that as a key component of rebuilding an international working class movement. And we and Mehmet, who hasn't said anything yet, I don't know if he has any questions, but we want to build a multimedia channel, a working class multimedia channel globally in all languages. And we started last year with a global day of programming on May Day with videos from all over the world. So we would invite you and other comrades around the world to submit videos of any actions on May Day for this channel, so that we can develop this global working class channel live worldwide that can build solidarity, education in the working class. And I think that's one of our key tasks. is to educate the American working class about the struggle of workers in other countries, Argentina, Korea, Russia. What is the real situation? Because that will strengthen our struggle here in the United States and break down the nationalism and xenophobia that the American capitalist class is whipping up.
Yeah. Well, some things on some of these issues that have been raised. I think Carol raises 2 points that are both very important and which have a relationship, but each are important in themselves. One is the attitude of revolutionaries towards environmental struggles, which we think are essential. We think any sectarian mistake, which sometimes happens in Marxist organizations, towards environmental movements, towards women's movements, towards movements which have to do with the rights of the LGBTI community, is a mistake. These movements are, of course, filled with bourgeois ideology and currents, but they are mass movements of mobilization against genuine phenomenon of oppression against exploited peoples. And the correct policy is to intervene all into these movements from a class perspective, not to abandon these movements because they are perceived as not having a center in the working class. Because the reality is, without a working class politics, these movements can go nowhere and will just go to reformist side tracks, which will not solve even these problems that they are discussing. Capitalism cannot solve them thoroughly. So this, on the one hand, a lot more can be said, but just as a general idea. On China, what is happening with China itself and with the role of China on a world scale has not happened before in history. It is not easy to compare it or just put a simple label on it. It has to be studied and discussed specifically. There is a capitalist restoration process underway, which has not been completed. The capitalist development in China, which is very large, on the one hand, has had a very strong presence of foreign capital, which has used China as a platform. On the other hand, there is a local bourgeoisie that is developing along these companies, which does not have exactly the same policies as the state bureaucrats, but which does not have yet control of the state itself. And this being the case, and the capitalism that is developing in China having the role internally and externally that capitalism has, of course, not progressive, it is exploitative of the places where it intervenes and the workers it intervenes on, cannot hide the fact that the war effort and the military and diplomatic imperialist intervention, which is being put together against Russia, against China, and which Biden has relaunched, and which Steve referred to, has to be opposed by revolutionaries everywhere. And of course, in the US, we think you have, of course, a particular responsibility in that sense, because adaptation to the bourgeois imperialist state, in the US leads to not fighting against this terrible role. So, of course, the navies that are being deployed in the South Pacific and in common exercises with Japan and India and the Philippines and Taiwan has to do with military preparation, which has as an objective the control of the capitalist restoration process in China. This is what is being discussed. Will they allow for the bureaucrats, the state bureaucrats, to try to control this process internally and try to put together a real rival? Or will they be able to break the control of the capitalist restoration process of these bureaucrats and to, how do you say this, to carve out China into pieces as it was before the revolution? This is what is being discussed. And in that sense, we think that revolutionaries have to oppose the imperialist offensive against China and Russia that is being promoted by US imperialism, and in a very profound and in a strengthened character after Biden has taken the presidency. And,
okay, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, but I just didn't want to leave that unsaid. And And then there was Steve's point. Oh yeah, on the collaboration and the I don't know if it's a YouTube channel or a web page or whatever the technical means are. But I just want to, and of course I want to. Ali, what Ali said is very important. We know that this is what we had talked about before in the meeting we had, and we think that a common position on the need for a conference and the political basis that we are discussing are important points to be able to take to debate with other groups and with workers in their organizations. So we salute what Ali has said, and we want to be able to take further steps. But beyond that, as I said before, Prensa Obrera puts up content every day on particularly on the class struggle in Argentina, but not only, also on positions on Latin America and on different places of the world. And we can discuss it, but all that content, both written and audiovisual and in other forms, quoting the source is open to the possibility for to be used, and we can definitely open up channels for collaboration on that line. We have a limit just due to resources on how much we can translate and subtitle of all that. We'd love to be able to do more, but a lot of our resources go into being able to put out, edit, and produce this content primarily for use in revolutionary organization in our country and in our region. But we would love to be able to translate and to put that into forms which can reach people elsewhere. So, let's talk about that. We're interested in what Steve says, and you could definitely count on using all our footage and videos and production, which we have a good amount of for May Day and for all other days of the class struggle, which are 365 a year.
I put in the chat box that we can get people to translate here also.
Well, yeah.
The responsibility isn't just yours.
Yeah. So if you see material and positions which you think are useful to you, and you can, we can collaborate on getting that into English or subtitling it or whatever. It's definitely something that we're interested in.
Alrighty then, I believe that brings us to time. I think Steve, you wanted to have a last comment?
That was it. I made my last comments. We want to have more international collaboration and work together, educate ourselves about what's going on in Argentina, and build an international movement. And I think on May Day, if you can provide us videos, they don't have to be translated. Videos or audio material, pictures, music, working class music of Argentina. Let's get it up in this portal that we're developing, because to do that in every country would give a wide view of the global class struggle, which is important to build solidarity and internationalism. So thanks.
Ask us for all the material that you need and want. And of course, if you can start looking at our feeds on social media and on our webpage, you'll find that there's a lot of material. You can ask us, but you can also take whatever you need. But yeah,
maybe what we could do towards building this hemisphere conference is have a day of the struggles in different countries around the pandemic and COVID.
Yeah.
And reports from healthcare workers in the hemisphere, North and South and Central Hemisphere, of healthcare workers talking about how they've been affected by COVID. That might be a way of building towards this conference.
Hey, Steve, why don't we table that for later? But thank you. I just know you go for a while, but thank you very much.
Saludos, compañeros.
Solidarity.
Bye, everyone.
Victory.
Bye.
Very good.
Thanks, everybody, for
Bye, comrades. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Very good. Take care.